The movie begins with a girl named Jules, who sneaks into her parents' room to tell her mom there's someone on the roof. Her mother, thinking she might be dreaming, suggests going back to sleep, but Jules insists she heard something. Frustrated, Jules insists she wasn't dreaming, while her mom tries to reassure her it could be an animal. Jules suggests it might be Santa Claus, which makes her mom laugh, saying it could be one of Santa's helpers checking if the roof is safe for reindeer. The mom goes downstairs and notices that Jules has left cookies and milk out for Santa. When she checks the front door, she finds it ajar and scolds her husband for not locking it before they go back to sleep. Meanwhile, Jules sneaks downstairs to see if Santa has come. She wakes her brother Yim, but he ignores her. Curious, Jules hides to watch. Suddenly, she sees Santa pull out an axe and head upstairs. Yim wakes up, thinking it's Jules, but is shocked to find it's not her. Jules listens in terror as the man, who is actually Art, goes to her parents' room. He attacks her father, and the mother wakes to the noise and tries to escape, but panics when she finds Jules' room empty. She rushes to Yim's room, only to discover the horrifying truth. Realizing it's too late, she runs downstairs, hoping to escape, but Art catches and kills her. Afterward, he sits down to enjoy the cookies and milk Jules left for Santa. When he hears a noise at the kitchen door, he finds Jules hiding. He greets her with a sinister smile, foreshadowing the terrifying encounter that awaits. 5 years earlier, a cop investigating the scene discovers Art's decapitated body on the ground. As he looks around, the cop notices that the body has vanished. Suddenly, Art, still headless, attacks him. The cop fires his gun, but the bullets have no effect. Art then uses the cop's head as a grotesque accessory while strolling down the street. Meanwhile, a woman on the subway is distracted, unaware of Art, who sits across from her wearing the cop's head. At a nearby hospital, a security guard hears screams and investigates. Calling for backup, he approaches the noise and is horrified to see Art and Victoria feasting on a body. Stunned, he watches as Art waves at him before he and Victoria kill him. Later, on the subway, a man dressed as Art approaches, honking a horn. He compliments their realistic costumes, saying they're even better than his own, and mentions wanting to add red paint to make it scarier. He asks if they can take a picture together later. Returning to their hideout, it's revealed that Victoria now has the subway guy's horn and is covered in red, hinting at their crime. While Art plays with rats, he goes to his room and rocks back and forth in a chair. Meanwhile, Victoria looks in the bathroom mirror and starts repeating, save me, and free girl." Suddenly, she slams her head against the mirror, grabs a shard of glass, and cuts her arms. They then both fall into a state of hibernation for 5 years. In the present, Sienna Shaw is released from the hospital and moves in with her Aunt Jess, who lives with her husband Greg and their daughter Gabby. Upon arriving home, Gabby gives Sienna a tight hug, excitedly noting how much she has grown. Gabby begs her never to leave again, and Sienna promises it won't happen. They share a laugh over the glitter on Gabby's face. Sienna reconnects with Aunt Jess, and they embrace warmly. Sienna goes upstairs with Gabby to see her new room, which Gabby decorated to look like a fairy tale, knowing Sienna loves wizards and dragons. Sienna exclaims it's the coolest room she's ever seen. Gabby gives Sienna a letter expressing her love and excitement for Christmas, hoping it will be full of laughter and fun. Meanwhile, 2 supervisors arrive at Art's house to inspect it before selling it to the state. One is startled by the swarming rats, but the other reassures him that it's nothing to worry about. His partner comments that the place feels soaked with angry souls waiting to be unleashed. The second supervisor, intrigued, asks if he really believes such stories. His colleague explains that in the 90s, a madman kidnapped and killed a dozen children, burying their bodies in the basement of this very building. Since then, people have said it's haunted. Despite the eerie tale, the second supervisor remains skeptical, dismissing it as superstition. Meanwhile, Sienna is unpacking with her cousin Gabby and recalls her father's drawings. In her memory, he promised to spend more time with her after finishing his comic. As a little girl, Sienna pointed out that he only drew boys, but he reassured her he could draw girls too. However, Sienna insisted none were superheroes, reminding him of his promise to create one for her. He promised to do something special after completing his comic, and she smiled, accepting his words. In the present, Sienna notices Gabby flipping through her diary. Furious, she yells at her cousin, insisting it's private and holds her forbidden thoughts. Meanwhile, the supervisors continue inspecting Art's house, noting the absence of light and running water, leaving it in darkness. One sees a flicker of light and finds Art, motionless and covered in cobwebs. The second supervisor stumbles upon Victoria submerged in black liquid in the bathtub. As he attempts to take a photo, she suddenly moves. Shocked, he can't believe his eyes, but Art springs to life and attacks him. The second supervisor is then ambushed by Victoria in a brutal assault while Art takes down the other supervisor, with Victoria watching, satisfied. Elsewhere, Sienna is having dinner with her aunt, uncle, and cousin Gabby. They discuss past events, and Gabby's dad jokes that Christmas isn't the same now that Gabby no longer believes in Santa Claus. Suddenly, Sienna has a vision of her deceased friend Rose, who taunts her, claiming that even taking bismuth won't help her forget her actions. Rose bitterly reminds Sienna that she's dead because of her, accusing Sienna and her brother of leading Art to them. She blames Sienna for her death, just as she did with her mother. Sienna's aunt asks if she's feeling okay, to which Sienna responds affirmatively, though shaken by Rose's appearance. Overwhelmed, she excuses herself and heads to her room. Meanwhile, Jonathan walks into his college dorm to find his friends, Nicole and his girlfriend Mia, hanging out. Mia tells Jonathan she's a big fan of his, noting that not many survive an encounter with Art. Obsessed with true crime, she invites him to be a guest on her podcast, saying a lot of people would love to hear his story. Jonathan hesitates, unsure if he's ready to relive such a traumatic experience. At that moment, Jonathan gets a call from his sister, Sienna. She asks how he's doing, and he replies that he's fine, just out of class. Sienna expresses how much she misses him, and Jonathan admits he misses her too, asking if everything is okay. She confesses she's just excited about spending Christmas together and will see him in a few days. They say their goodbyes and hang up. Gabby then asks Sienna if she's feeling all right. Sienna reassures her but mentions that her medication sometimes makes her feel nauseous. Meanwhile, Art is busy crafting new weapons using a fire extinguisher and nitrogen. As this happens, Sienna and Gabby spend time doing their makeup. Sienna compliments Gabby's beauty, and the curious girl asks about the large scar on Sienna's hand. Sienna explains that she got it during a fight where she was seriously injured. Elsewhere, Santa Claus is at a bar with friends, posing for pictures with girls. After they leave, Art spots Santa through the window and becomes excited, realizing he's found the perfect suit for his plan. He carries a black bag into the bar, drawing attention. Everyone finds him amusing, especially when he pretends to be thrilled to see Santa. The bartender, noticing him, asks what's in the bag, and Art pulls out a horn, making everyone laugh. Meanwhile, Sienna talks with her aunt, who gently advises her not to pretend everything is fine. Though she admits she can't fully understand Sienna's struggles, she promises things will get better. Sienna opens up, saying her aunt reminds her of her mom before her dad passed away, describing her as the sweetest person she could talk to about anything. Her aunt nods, adding, "Yeah, but sometimes she talked like a truck driver," making them both laugh. Sienna admits she misses her mom, and her aunt replies that she misses her too. Back at the bar, Art continues to fool around with Santa, who warns him not to mess with his things, threatening that if he doesn't behave, he'll end up on the naughty list. Santa asks the bartender for another round, but the bartender refuses, assuming Art is underage. Despite this, the three continue drinking. In a moment of madness, Art spits in Santa's face, enraging him. Tensions escalate when Art urinates on Santa, prompting him to try and punch Art. However, Art pulls a gun from his bag and kills Santa's two friends. Desperate, Santa begs for mercy. Art then dons the Santa suit while the real Santa is tied to a chair. Next, he uses nitrogen from the fire extinguisher on him and picks up a hammer, ready to finish the job. Meanwhile, Sienna's uncles chat, with Greg asking Jess about Sienna. Jess says she's coping as well as can be expected, and Greg mentions it's good to see her smiling again. Jess adds they plan to go Christmas shopping at the mall, where Sienna intends to buy a gift for Jonathan. Greg expresses concern, warning that the outing might be risky and could cause Sienna to regress. Jess firmly states she'll support her niece, emphasizing Sienna's healing process and that she's staying on top of her medication. In her room, Sienna is focused on writing in her journal. At the mall, children line up for pictures with Santa, who decides to take a break. While Sienna and Gabby pick out a gift for Jonathan, Sienna suddenly feels a strange sensation as past memories resurface. Art, dressed as Santa, walks by and waves at her, but she brushes it off as a weird illusion. Meanwhile, Jonathan watches Mia's podcast discussing Art, He receives a call from Sienna, and they agree to meet. During their conversation, Sienna assures him everything seems fine, leading Jonathan to ask why she wants to see him now. Sienna admits she misses him and suggests he come to their uncle's place tonight instead of waiting until Christmas Eve. Jonathan, however, can't, as he's been invited to a party on campus. At that moment, Cole, Jonathan's friend, shows up and introduces himself to Sienna, mentioning he's heard a lot about her. Shortly after, Mia appears, surprised to see Sienna. Sienna is happy to see Mia again and smiles, while Jonathan explains that Mia has been following the entire story closely. Mia expresses her desire to interview Sienna about how she's been coping despite everything. But Sienna, visibly angry, responds that she's haunted daily by images of her dead family and friends, images that seem to wave at her while screaming. She reveals she's covered in scars, constantly reminded of how that psychopath ruined their lives. In frustration, she exclaims that they're all the same and wonders why people can't treat at least one person with humanity, her voice rising as she vents her pent-up anger and pain. Jonathan, concerned, asks what's going on and why Sienna lashed out at her friends. Sienna confesses that she thought she saw Art at the mall. Skeptical, Jonathan questions her certainty, but Sienna firmly states that he was dressed as Santa Claus, convinced of his presence. Jonathan reminds her that it's impossible since she decapitated him, leading both to realize that if Art has returned, he might have external help. Alarmed, Sienna insists they need to destroy Victoria, claiming she's not human but demonic. She reveals that she still has Art's letters and has been researching demonology and possession, explaining that Art was obsessed with these subjects. In a twisted way, she believes he was right. She begins reading part of one letter, which states that demons sometimes try to enter the human world but can't do it alone. They need to choose a vessel, preferably someone recently deceased and truly sinister, like a serial killer. Sienna reads another part of the letter, explaining that when a demon comes into the physical world, they assign a counterpart to prevent them from becoming too powerful. Jonathan, realizing the implications, expresses concern for Sienna's safety. She explains that their father created the sword to guide her and prepare her for this moment, revealing that Art is now using Victoria Hayes as his host, which is why she disappeared that night. Sienna tells Jonathan she needs to return to Terrifier to retrieve their father's sword. Meanwhile, at the mall, Art, dressed as Santa, calls over a little girl, handing her a doll and causing excitement among the other kids clamoring for toys. However, a mall employee realizes that the Santa is an imposter, not the real one they hired. Just as a security guard approaches to escort Art out, a child opens a gift bag, revealing a bomb that detonates, causing a devastating explosion. Back at home, Jonathan decides to take his medication to feel better but soon becomes overwhelmed, throwing everything on the floor in a fit of frustration. In her uncle's house, Sienna places a gift under the tree, but Gabby spots her and asks if it's for her. With a hint of attitude, Sienna replies that it's none of Gabby's business. Gabby notices Sienna's hands stained black and inquires about it. Sienna casually explains that she slipped and fell before heading to the sink to wash her hands. Elsewhere, Art arrives at Jonathan's party, still dressed as Santa and carrying a bag. Sienna's aunt asks her where Jonathan is, and she replies that he's at a campus party. Surprised, her aunt remarks that it's unusual for him to go to a party after everything that happened. Gabby's aunt offers her cereal, but Gabby claims Sienna doesn't like it. In their room, Sienna reveals she never told anyone about her dislike. It was in her diary, suggesting Gabby read it without permission. Gabby apologizes and admits she read everything, prompting Sienna to accuse her of breaking a promise. Gabby defends herself, saying she wanted to understand Sienna's situation. Meanwhile, Art enters the university where Jonathan studies and listens in the dorms as Mia talks to Cole to convince Jonathan to learn more about Art, even what he smells like and how he looks. At dinner with Gabby and her uncle, Sienna learns about the mall explosion that killed 5 and left 6 missing, allegedly caused by a clown dressed as Santa. This news devastates her, and she begs her uncles to call Jonathan, warning him about Art's threat. Greg goes to look for Jonathan, and horror reaches its climax when Art takes a good piss and then brutally attacks Cole and Mia, who were getting it on in the shower. The psychopath uses a chainsaw to leave them stiff for being lustful. The first was Mia, who finally got to see the eyes of the terrible one, as she had wished, and then she went with Cole, who was brutally divided, creating a horrendous scene where Art makes little red angels on the ground. While Sienna falls asleep, she dreams of her father and the angels creating her warrior angel costume and the sword. She then wakes up to discover that Art and the disturbed Vicky have invaded her house, and Art incapacitates her with a mace. When Sienna regains consciousness, she sees her uncle nailed to the wall like a poster from a gore manga and Jess tied up in front of her in a grotesque manner. Art ends Sienna's aunt by making her swallow live mice while Victoria continues to play a sinister role in the events. Victoria mocks Sienna and puts a crown of thorns on her, revealing that Jonathan has been killed. Victoria tries to possess Sienna, but she resists and manages to open a gift, giving Victoria its contents, namely, her father's sword. In this way, Sienna divides Victoria like a figurine of the ego and disintegrates. Art attacks Sienna with his chainsaw, but she gains the upper hand. Victoria's blood burns the ground and creates a portal to hell, causing Gabby to fall and grab the edge. Sienna leaves Art behind to save her, however, she cannot save her and falls into the abyss along with the sword. Art escapes through a window, and Sienna vows to find and rescue Gabby while promising to end Art once and for all. The movie concludes at a bus station, where a woman reads a book about the ninth circle of hell. An unconcerned driver strikes up a conversation with her, but both are surprised by Art, who, despite being weakened, with a sinister smile and his inseparable horn, makes it clear that Christmas Eve will not be peaceful for his victims. And that's how this disorderly movie ends.